So these are the auditions for guest host of my new show, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Please step up and state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phil. You know, every pancake has two sides, and we're going to get to the other side of that pancake when we come back from the break.
Mr. Shatner.
Bernie Sanders will probably be the Democratic nominee.
You're going to have to talk faster.
I was going at full speed.
Kelsey Grammer.
Very well. I'll send you all to heaven before condemning you to hell. My little snowy flake, poor little snowy flake, triggered in every way.
President Bill Clinton, whenever you're ready.
Hey, how y'all doing? So, how about we play a little game of the old switcheroo?
Thank you.
Hey, if I get the gig, do I get an intern?
Thank you.
Just asking.
Tom Hanks, go ahead, please.
I am Tom Hanks at your service.
Can you try an announcer voice, sir?
Oh, an announcer voice. Oh, come on. I got a lot of movies to do. Okay, I'll do an announcer voice. I am an announcer. I'm the announcer. Ha! How was that? The announcer guy. Ha!
I think we're going to have to do another audition call, guys.
All right, so who should I pick to be the official guest host of Jimmy at the Crossroads? I'm really leaning towards Jim Kirk, William Shatner. I think the Jim thing fits. Plus, you can't go wrong with Captain Kirk. That guy really knew how to lead and how to talk. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. It's Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. A very special edition. We will have a conversation today with three Congresswomen, freshmen in the U.S. House of Representatives: Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Florida Representative Kat Cammack, and Congresswoman Lisa McClain of Michigan. All join us together here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Plus, we will talk with 2008 pentathlete Eli Bremer and Roshini Rajkumar, good friend of the show. She, of course, is a communications and messaging coach. She's a licensed attorney. She is a radio host in Minnesota, right in Minneapolis, where the George Floyd tragedy happened last year, and of course the Derek Chauvin trial. And with Bremer and Rajkumar, we are going to talk about the Olympics protests and more. We've got a lot coming up here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, and we're getting started right now.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. With all generations, oh, what a great mix. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Grateful to all generations, oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
But hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I am Jimmy Sengenberger, and it is such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today, as it is always here on the program, with brand new content today. And we appreciate you being along for the ride. If you enjoy the video, if you enjoy what we've got today, please do go ahead and share it. And also follow our friends at the Washington Examiner and like this video. Give it a like as well. In just a bit, we will share my interview recorded a little while ago with three freshman Congresswomen in the U.S. House of Representatives: Lauren Boebert of Colorado, Kat Cammack of Florida, and Lisa McClain of Michigan. A great conversation. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to sharing that with you here in just a bit. But we're going to get right to the first segment today, right into our Crossroads panel here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, again coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. We have a fun intro, of course, always for intro video for the Crossroads panel. Let's cue that up.
Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads.
All right, welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads, and I am so pleased to be joined today by two good friends. One in the middle has been on this program and others many times that I have hosted over the years. Roshini Rajkumar, I'm so pleased to welcome Roshini back to the program. She's a strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives, host of Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota, and the Real Leaders with Roshini podcast that can be found in your favorite podcast app. She's a licensed attorney and former TV news reporter. Her book, Communicate That, is in its 3rd edition, and her website is ownyourwow.com. Roshini, good to have you. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Great to be with you today.
And I'm so pleased to be rejoined by Eli Bremer. We last talked to Eli last year along with Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, who sentenced Larry Nassar in that horrific trial dealing with Olympic abuse. Eli Bremer has been one of those leading voices on addressing Olympic abuse and reforming the Olympic Committee, and there was legislation passed last year. He was heavily involved in that process because he is a 2008 pentathlete who competed in those Beijing Games. He is also an Air Force Academy graduate, all-around good guy. Eli Bremer, welcome back to the program.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. Great to be on with you.
It's good to have you both here on the show together. I think it's going to be great because I really wanted, given the discussion of Gwen Berry and protests of the American flag and the national anthem at Olympic activities, including the trials, may manifest itself on the world stage once the Olympics actually take place come the end of July in Tokyo. It's so stunning to me when you have these kind of protests on the world stage. But I thought, let's dive into that from the perspective of someone who competed in the Olympics again in the Beijing Games in 2008. And also, Roshini Rajkumar, since we have had so many travesties and so many issues regarding race relations and the riots and protests that we've seen over the last year plus, particularly because of what happened in Minneapolis vis-a-vis the murder of George Floyd, as we saw with Derek Chauvin being tried and convicted. It really goes together. And so I wanted to dive into this. And you know, it's so striking to me when we have this happening on the world stage, but I just want to get overall sort of sentiments, and I'll start with you, Eli, as the Olympian of the group today. What's your take on the Olympic Games and political beliefs being expressed in those ways and where we are at this moment?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate when you have that sort of protest happening. The Olympics are such a great force for good in society, and this is not just America, it's around the world. Every time that the Summer Olympic Games are held, they are the largest event that's ever been held in peacetime world history, with the exception of the upcoming Olympics because they're not going to allow international spectators due to the pandemic. But it has such an incredible ability to allow people to engage in friendly competition on the athletic field and celebrate what we are as human beings. And at a time when, you know, the world has been torn apart for many ways, and in the United States where there's a lot of people that are not in agreement, this is a great time for us to come together. And it's really sad to me to see that people are using that platform to push a political agenda. Now, there's plenty of other agendas that we could be pushing. We should be talking about the Uyghurs in China. We should be talking about the Iranian wrestler that was executed for being at an anti-government protest. So I think there are issues that could get brought to the light, and I would like to see athletes talk more about that. And I'd also like to keep them off the podium. There's a big difference between using your platform to speak and then taking away the spotlight from people that have earned it, who are also on the podium.
Roshini, what are your thoughts on what Eli just said, but in particular, as someone who's a communications coach, what do you make of these kinds of protests, especially when we are talking about a global platform like the Olympics?
One of the beautiful things about the United States is we do have freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And the very reason why you cannot be put in jail for burning a flag is one of those things we are protected from, is expressing how we want to express something. But with that great privilege and right also comes the responsibility in how we represent what the USA really does stand for, what our Constitution stands for. So what I will say as a patriot myself is there's a time and a place for everything. I don't believe the podium is the place for US athletes or really any athletes to make their own personal political statement. Remember, when you get the honor, you earn that honor of being one of the three, in many cases, of whatever event it is, to then make the Olympic team. You're not just representing your Olympic team or your sport, you're representing your country. And in the case of US athletes, you're representing all of us in the United States. So when you go to Tokyo and are competing for a medal, you are representing me individually, my state of Minnesota, my country, the USA. So what you do is not just about you. And that's something that I would like Gwen Berry to really think about. I think it was really unfortunate at the medals of her particular event and when she made the team that she chose to disrespect the flag. I mean, ultimately, you're an ambassador for the United States of America. You do have the right to say the words you do without being tortured in America, but I don't know that you have the right to go to any stage and say exactly what you want.
Roshini, I appreciate what you're saying about representing this country. And Eli Bremer, as an Olympian in the 2008 Games in Beijing, how did you view yourself on the world stage as a representative of the United States? What went through your mind in that regard, especially in terms of setting an example and showing people what our country is made of?
Well, it was the greatest honor of my life, and I'm never going to forget walking into the opening ceremonies with Team USA, and that's the name. It's Team USA. I've got the shirt on here because I'm still so proud to have been affiliated with Team USA. And you have to understand, Jimmy, and I think you do, but I want everybody to understand, America is respected around the globe. We are the shining light on the hill around the globe. We represent the hope of freedom and prosperity. That's why people are trying desperately to come to our country. It's not because we're a horrible nation, as many on the left are now saying. It's because we're the greatest nation on the planet. And I took that very seriously. I said, I'm going out to represent every person in our nation. I receive, thousands and thousands of letters of support from around the country of people saying, you are our team. And I think that that's important, and every athlete should recognize that. And to me, when an athlete does a protest, particularly on the podium, it doesn't become about your country, it becomes about them. And this is a moment when every athlete should rise up and realize it's bigger than them. And in particular, it takes away from the other people on the podium. No one's talking about the first or second place woman in the hammer throw competition at Olympic trials. That's unfair. They have a chance to go out, get new sponsors, make some money off of this. And instead, another athlete took from them, without their permission, their moment in the spotlight and took the honor of that podium away from them. And that's where I have a problem.
Roshini Rajkumar, from the perspective of communication crisis coach, when I see this kind of a protest and anticipation now that this will happen at the Olympics, it puts the Olympics in the position of, I think awkward and of being a poor representative just by nature of who's competing there, in a rough spot. What do you make of that, and what would you advise the Olympic Committee to do in this regard? I mean, should they have a conversation and say, you absolutely should not do this? Is there anything that you think should be done in terms of steps taken or any sort of PR management?
Right. You need to have some crisis prevention and crisis management here, both from the U.S. Olympic side and then the overall Olympic Committee or the Olympic overall world leadership. And just this one athlete now has set into motion a domino effect where all teams now probably have to have these conversations. What does it mean to be a member of this particular team, whatever team that is? What does it mean when you go up there? And so it really is adding these layers that I think add stress to the athletes and their training, add stress to their families, definitely add stress to spectators. But you really have to go into this now eyes wide open that any one athlete could decide to do what Gwen Berry did and make some sort of spectacle of him or herself on the podium. I really hope that athleticism and professionalism, as Eli has shown over the years when he was an athlete and now as a broadcaster and spokesperson, I hope that individual power and individual pride and dignity will come out of these athletes. But we now have another talking point. And you and I, as talk show hosts, Jimmy, love talking points. And, we get into the muck of these things. But we have another talking point that I don't think was really necessary for this very celebratory game. I mean, the very fact that Tokyo is happening after a pandemic where it had to be canceled last year. I mean, that's really the bigger story. So I would really try to appeal each of the teams, if I were coaching, each of the team leadership, as well as the country governing bodies and the Olympic governing body. I would really try to appeal to each individual athlete's sense of dignity and pride in their own nation and in the games themselves, and come up with the language that you think will authentically work with your particular audience, but that really needs to be said. And as I understand it, I'm sure Eli can comment on this with much more authority, but as I understand it, the world governing bodies don't want riots. They don't want protests, and they've made it clear they will not stand for that if anything like that were to happen in Tokyo.
Eli, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the International Olympic Committee has held a very hard line on this, which I agree with, that protests on the field of play, protests on the podium are not going to be allowed. I don't know the exact punishment, but I do know, having been to an Olympics, been around them for 20 years, your visa is actually your Olympic credential. And so I've heard that, everything's on the table, including revoking your visa into the country. I don't know if that is true or not, but I've heard that is the case. And I have been critical of the governance of the U.S. and International Olympic Committee. And this one, I agree with it. And, in the U.S., the woke mob, I think, got its claws into the U.S. Olympic movement. And the domestically, they came out and said, hey, we're going to support this, which is interesting because the U.S. leadership didn't do anything about Larry Nassar. Well, that's not true. They did sort of cover it up. They've made a lot of really bad decisions. We've got an athlete I'm working with right now that is being retaliated against. They've tried to remove him from the Olympic team for speaking out about sexual misconduct of a coach. And yet they said, gee, this is something we support. And I've warned leadership. I've said, be very careful what you ask for. Do you really want an Iranian standing on the podium and making anti-Semitic statements? Do you want someone standing on the U.S. podium and holding a Confederate flag? How far do you want this to go? When the shoe's on the other foot, are you going to like it? Because Roshini is an attorney, so I know, Roshini, you understand this. When you make rules, you have to apply them equally, which is obviously they don't want that right now, and that's a big issue. And so for me, I come down and say, okay, if you don't want Confederate flags on the podium, if you don't want Iranians talking about death to Israel, then let's all agree to act like professionals. And this seems to be going away in the U.S. society, this idea of common decency, mutual respect, and having a conversation. And I believe the Olympics can actually foster that in a way that other entities can't.
Again, we're talking just a few minutes left with our guests, Roshini Rajkumar and Eli Bremer. And I think, Roshini, that Eli hit on something so important in terms of conversations, really, and whether or not we are willing to be adults and be professional, especially when we're talking about Olympians on the world stage. But with this moment with Black Lives Matter, and especially with, we just had the sentencing last Friday of Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, who, of course, was convicted of murdering George Floyd last May of 2020. So there seems to be an attitude among some activists and activist athletes that their cause is righteous enough where they should just speak up and do whatever they can in terms of a protest. What's your sense for that when you have this sort of attitude that you are so in the right, you have to speak out and use any of those sorts of platforms, if that is the motivation versus potentially, let me just get some attention?
Yeah, I mean, it is really unfortunate that decorum and decency have gone out the window. And I would say more in the United States than probably any other country. But look, I'm a brown woman. I've been discriminated against all my life. I don't want discrimination. So the very fact that any athlete would decide that he or she can use a platform that's really a global platform, which is so symbolic to almost every citizen of the world as their own individual platform, is really abhorrent to me. I mean, there are times that there's a time and a place, and that platform is not the place to do that. We have to remember we are supposed to be a country of laws, the United States. And the moment that the majority starts to just sidestep and literally ignore those laws, the moment that we all fail. A very fitting example of this, Jimmy, you may have seen that Bill Cosby's sentence, his conviction, has been overturned by the Supreme Court in his state. They declared in their ruling that because in a previous civil settlement, a prosecutor then years later used words and confessions or admissions that Bill Cosby used in that civil settlement, which he was told would never be used against him in the future, were then used later to prosecute him. He eventually was convicted, went to prison in 2018. Well, that just got overturned and that was rightly so. As abhorrent as you may think his behavior was or could have been, based on the law, if a prosecutor or another attorney gave him word that being open and honest in one forum will not mean you're going to be charged in another forum, and then that's basically lied, it's a lie, it is absolutely correct that his conviction was overturned. We may not like it, just like these athletes. You may not like something about what's happening in our United States right now, but if we think about the bigger vision of what the United States stands for, that's what you're representing when you go to the Olympics. So I really hope that decency and professionalism will come through, because I think the Olympics, more than anything, around, and Eli, a hero to all of us from childhood. We look at the Olympics as this huge platform. And I really hope that no Olympian this year ruins that platform for little kids all over the globe.
We got to let you go, but Eli Bremer, I want to give you a last word for a final thought, sir.
I was that little kid. In 1984, I remember watching Mary Lou Retton compete in the Olympics, and that was so inspiring to me. When I was growing up, I told everybody I want to be an Olympian when I grow up. So it has a profound impact on our youth. It has a profound impact on the nation's psyche as a whole. And there's, like you said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And this is a time when we can truly bring our nation together if we want to. We can all support Team USA. There's going to be some great stories out there. I'd encourage you, let your kids watch it, because I know a ton of Olympians. The vast majority of them are just so proud to represent Team USA. Don't let a couple bad apples spoil your Olympics if that's what happens this year.
There's a great Joe Bonamassa tune about just because you can, don't mean you should. Check it out if you haven't heard it. It's fantastic. Roshini Rajkumar, strategic crisis and communications coach, WCCO radio host, and Eli Bremer, 2008 pentathlete at the Beijing Games. Thank you so much for your insights today. Very great thoughts, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you. Once again, Roshini Rajkumar and Eli Bremer joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And I think they were making just such important points about how, at this juncture especially, whenever you're on the world stage, you're representing the United States of America. That's who you're representing. And you can't forget that. You must not forget that. And that's what really gets me going when it comes to these issues of protests. I mean, in sports in general, there's too much politics in sports. But when it comes to the Olympics, you are representing the United States of America. You are not simply yourself. This isn't just an American game. It's your country. And if you're not standing for the national anthem, for example, you're not showing respect for your own nation that you are representing, then what kind of advocate are you for your country? What kind of representative are you for your country? Let's play a clip here before we bring on briefly Nathan Matoush, our producer extraordinaire. This is Dan Crenshaw on Fox News, I think it was last week, at least the other day, talking a little bit about this and especially the politicization of sports.
We don't need any more activist athletes. She should be removed from the team. The entire point of the Olympic team is to represent the United States of America. That's the entire point. Okay, so it's one thing when these NBA players do it. Okay, fine, we'll just stop watching. But now the Olympic team, and it's multiple cases of this. They should be removed. That should be the bare minimum requirement. Is that you believe in the country representing. But look, taking it a couple levels deeper. This is the pathology that occurs when we're teaching critical race theory into our institutions, because critical race theory, again, basically teaches that our institutions are racist, that our systems are deeply racist. Now, you can't see the racism, right, because it's subtle, but and if you deny it, it's because of your white fragility. But you're teaching people this constantly. And this is what it results in. It results in this in these displays of hatred towards our own country. And it's got to stop.
I think Dan Crenshaw, who has given so much, including an eye, for this country, serving our country overseas to defend our rights and our freedoms, including, yes, freedom of speech, I think he's spot on. And Nathan Matoush, one thing for me that comes to mind also is that while freedom of speech is an important thing, it is critical to our society, you are not guaranteed a platform. You are not guaranteed a radio show, for example, or an opportunity to publish an article in a newspaper. You're not guaranteed a slot in the Olympics if you are representing this country and you decide not to represent the best interests of this country.
Oh yeah, definitely, and well said. And it was a great interview there with Eli Bremer and Roshini Rajkumar. They said it exactly correctly in that clip with Dan Crenshaw. We are the United States of America. We're supposed to be standing united. And I think these athletes, some of them, they think that they're representing something great, but really, I think we're taking a step back here. We're taking a step back to when we were a divided country. Black versus white. I want to see everyone united together, especially on the biggest stage in the world, the Olympic Games. I think I think they're going to lose some viewership. I think it's a mistake. And quite frankly, I think we're taking a step back. Like Crenshaw said, these Olympic athletes are representing the United States of America. If they're representing us like that, I think it looks bad for our country. Do you really see any other countries doing this type of stuff?
No.
Quite frankly, it's kind of embarrassing, Jim.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think embarrassing is the right word for it, Mr. Matoush. And when we talk about other countries, no. Could you imagine what would happen if a Chinese Olympian or a Russian Olympian were to say something in protest of their country? It would be, they don't have a guaranteed freedom of speech in their countries, but it would be a brutal consequence. Now, certainly that's not the kind of consequence. You shouldn't be locked away or anything like that for speaking your mind, but being tossed off the team like Crenshaw says, or having some other sort of consequence. Eli Bremer was just talking about penalties. If they actually do protest, according to the International Olympic Committee, you're not supposed to do a protest, there will be some kind of penalty, and there should be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, so. And, like you said, we've seen it in the NBA, we've seen it in the NFL, and, quite frankly, that was bad within itself, but, we kind of got over that a little bit, but this is different. This is the Olympic Games, Jimmy. These athletes representing the United States of America. And, yeah, I think there's got to be some kind of penalty. I don't think they should be allowed to do that. I think you got to find a balance. Like Roshini said, we are a country of freedom of speech, but to put it right in everyone's face on the Olympic stage, And to kind of signify this movement that we're not together. We're not the United States of America anymore. It's divided. It breaks my heart, Jimmy, because I love this country. I love all races, all creed, all people of religion, people of color, and I want to see us standing united, especially on the Olympic stage, my friend.
And just a final question for you, because you are a big sports guy, much bigger sports guy than I am. In fact, you've done a lot of high school sports announcing over the past few years. And Nathan, what do you make of how political sports generally has become? I mean, the MLB, for example, with the All-Star game, leaving Atlanta and leaving all of that economic benefits to the black community in Atlanta, for example, and coming here to Denver, Colorado, where we are broadcasting from in just a couple of weeks or so. What do you make of that kind of thing?
Jimmy, I'm not going to be watching the MLB All-Star game. I love that it's in Colorado. I'm stoked with that, but I don't like the reason why they moved the All-Star game here. Why not keep it in Georgia where, it is a primarily black community. It represents a lot of people of color. I think they should have definitely kept it there instead.
Well, the economic benefits, I think it's like $190 million that they lose out by not having the All-Star game there.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of money.
Economic benefits, and quite frankly, I don't think the administration really, gives a hoot. And that's what really bothered me is when you bring on Joe Biden on ESPN and he says, I think you should move the game. And then, a day later, they just follow and they bow down to him and say, yeah, we're going to move the game. And then they move it to Colorado where, there's, we're 10%, I think, people of color. I think in Colorado, and not to bash
more than that, but I think your point is still well taken. I think it's more than that, but I don't know the percentage. But
yeah, no, exactly. That's what bothered me is bringing MLB into politics, and quite frankly, it's breaking my heart. I love watching sports, and it's always been a time where we can put political views aside and stand one as a nation. So
there's a time and a place for protest that is important, that is valuable, and people should be out there speaking their mind, calling for change, but using an opportunity where people are trying to enjoy and get away from all the chaos, especially coming out of the pandemic, and before when we were during the pandemic. And people had such limited opportunity to enjoy sports, certainly in person, but even on video. It's insane. But Nathan Matoush, always great to check in with you. Thanks for popping on for a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure. And, I love being on, as always. Matoush Magic, saying style. It's always a great show.
Light of the right.
The light of the right.
The light of the right. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush Magic, producer extraordinaire, everybody. All right, we're going to take a break here. Drop that video in, and we will get the little video for you, a little entertainment. And then my interview, recorded just a little while ago, with 3 Congresswomen, extraordinary women doing tremendous things in Congress in their own way, but they are unified, and you will see that unity and that friendship and that camaraderie here in just a moment. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado, Kat Cammack, Congresswoman for Florida's 3rd Congressional District, and Lisa McClain, she is representative from Michigan. They all joined me together in between votes right here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. We will get to that conversation. It was a lot of fun. You're going to enjoy it. Coming up here in just a moment. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. If you haven't already, please give this video a like. Please go ahead and share it. We've got so much more coming up. Keep it right here.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Are you all right with being a shark maverick? Was it okay to team up with you?
I'm good, man. We're a part. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
And now, the further future adventures of Starship Winkler.
In today's episode, the captain is making travel plans.
Sparks, open up a frequency to price expediosity line.
Yes, Captain.
Hello, and welcome to Price Expediosity Line. How can I help you?
Well, I'll need a room.
Are you traveling alone?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame. Never found the right woman, huh?
Well, there was this... No, wait, just book me a bed.
King, queen, full, twin, Murphy, or bunk.
King. You never know.
Well, as long as you're convinced. All right, name your price.
Name my price?
That's how it works. Name your price.
$6?
$6 it is. Let's plug it in here. Bippity, boppity, boo, and... Sorry, you were outbid.
By how much?
Penny. Someone bid 6. Oh, 1.
Who?
Oh boy, I just booked a room for $6.01.
Well, will the captain ever make a good bed bid? Tune in next time when we hear...
Here's one for $602.
I'll take it.
$1,000.
No! Damn dramatic pauses.
On Starship Winkler.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
And ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the Crossroads interview. Here's your host, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. So great to be continuing with you, and especially today with a tremendous group that is fighting the good fight in Congress in the minority, although I think next year we have to change that. They are all brand new to Congress as of January of this year. 2 of them have been on Jimmy at the Crossroads before. One, well, I'm so pleased to be having on for the very first time. Let's welcome 3 Congresswomen who have just voted on the floor of the United States House of Representatives from the great state of Colorado, where I am at. It is U.S. Representative Lauren Boebert of CD3 in Colorado. In the middle, Congresswoman Cammack of Florida's 3rd Congressional District. And then we have Congresswoman Lisa McClain of Michigan's 10th District. Again, they are all fresh women. They are fighting the good fight. There we go. Well played, Mr. Matoush, producer extraordinaire. Ladies, Congresswomen, welcome to the program. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you for coming on today. We're going to dive into several topics, but first, I love something about this, and I know Representatives Boebert and Cammack, you both are familiar with this because you're the individuals here, but Congresswoman Boebert, you're a Florida native. You're representing the 3rd Congressional District in Colorado. Kat Cammack, you are a Colorado native representing the 3rd Congressional District in Florida. What kind of flip-flop is that? What's that like?
We planned this thing out for years. Decades of planning right here. This has been in the works. People don't realize we're taking over the world.
You know, I think it is, I'm easily amused, but I find that utterly hysterical and too much fun. And I know that all 3 of you have become good friends already, fast friends in Congress. And I'm curious what that dynamic is like when you are, and feel free, whoever wants to jump in, when you are coming in as freshmen into the U.S. House of Representatives. You have that freshman class, you're getting oriented, you're meeting people, you're figuring things out. What is that like, and what is it like to build relationships with people in Congress that you'd never met or worked with before?
Well, for me, I've never been in politics. I've spent, 30 plus years in business, and relationships rule the world. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate both Kat and Lauren. They have traditional values. They're like-minded people, but more than that, they're good, genuine people who have been very warm and welcoming to me. Not to mention, we have a heck of a lot of fun.
That's right. Absolutely. That's right. Well, and if you look at what Nancy Pelosi did to really ruin our freshman orientation and being sworn in, it's really phenomenal to have good people like Kat and Lisa here to be friends with and to lean on in this time and just be able to build one another up, because unfortunately leadership here has done everything that they can to tear us down, to separate us, to divide us, and to keep us isolated. So I think this camaraderie is very much needed.
It brings us closer together as opposed to farther apart. It's really working the opposite.
Well, and I think even more broadly, you look at the freshman class today, the 117th Congress, the conservative freshmen who came in are incredible. Really a class of total badasses. And to be a part of this, it's so incredibly humbling. It's truly a privilege to serve. I know all of us, when we walk in the Capitol every day, we still get those butterflies. We still look up and think, oh my gosh, how did we get here? And I can't think of two better women to serve alongside with, who are hard workers, intelligent, truly badasses in their own right. And the thing that I love about particularly the women of this 117th class is that not one of us campaigned on being a woman. We campaigned on being the best person for the job, and not because we check a box, but because we really care and love our country. We love our states, our communities, and like Lisa said, and like Lauren said, we have a whole heck of a lot of fun, but we also are doing things that haven't been done before. So we're excited. Yeah, and if you can't tell, I tweet, Lisa sings, and Kat cusses. Yeah.
Well, Lisa, I play the harmonica, as you noticed there, so maybe we can have a duet sometime. It is always a treat to get to know a little bit of that personal side. And one thing, Congresswoman Boebert, that you were mentioning is the challenge, especially with Pelosi and how she brought things in January. Like, you were sworn in amidst the pandemic and things were not normal, and yet you fostered those relationships. You did everything that you could despite that to work together and to build something. And that's what I want to get at, is from the personal side, that's all important because it really builds that camaraderie. But Congresswoman Boebert, how does that manifest itself when you're actually in the trenches there in Congress fighting for liberty and the Constitution against this radical agenda of President Biden and Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Jimmy, being here in this, you know the layout of Colorado and the questions that are asked. People want to know, are you going to be bipartisan? Colorado is very purple, and they want to know if you're going to work with the other side. And being here in this environment shows me that Democrats have no intention of working with the other side. They have no intention of unity. They have no intention of being bipartisan. We only vote on Democrat legislation, and even if a privileged resolution is brought by the minority party, they vote it down. They table it immediately because they don't want to vote on Republican legislation. We all have legislation that has been introduced that we will not have an opportunity to vote on. I even have my Protecting American Energy Jobs Act, which would tremendously help Colorado and our entire nation, and even have global impacts if we were able to get that passed. And so I have a discharge petition to try to get 218 signatures so we can force this legislation to the floor for a vote. Kat has a piece of legislation that she has a discharge petition on as well that I'll let her talk about. But we are using these tools of the minority to try to get the message out, expose the Democrat policies, their radical agenda. It is more extreme than any of us could have ever imagined. And we're showing that we have policies that actually work for our districts, work for our states, and work for our country.
Absolutely. And to that point, Lauren was talking about discharge petitions. It's really the only tool in the toolbox that we have as the minority party right now, just for 18 months, and then we're coming back at you. But that discharge petition is so critical for us to be able to bypass the committee process, bypass the speaker. In the case of the Born Alive Abortion Protection Survivors Act, we have had that piece of legislation blocked by Nancy Pelosi over 75 times. 75 times. And at this point, this is not a pro-life, pro-choice debate. This is a child who has survived an abortion attempt, is outside the womb. And this legislation says that not only does the doctor have to deliver life-saving care to that child, but then the medical professionals in the room have to report it, because this is something that is occurring on a daily basis, and no one is talking about it because by law it's not having to be reported. And so when you talk about the discharge petition, you need 218 signatures to bring it to the floor. Today, I have 213 signatures on that discharge petition. 5. There are more than 24 Democrats who have claimed that they are either Catholic or pro-life. Yet Nancy Pelosi is holding this hostage, saying that she will strip committee assignments. She will definitely make sure that life is a living hell for these Democrats who sign on to this. But I know that Americans will always stand up for the life of the unborn. I know that Americans across this country demand that if a child survives an abortion attempt, that doctor should, by law, be required to fight for the life of that child. And I'm so adamant about this because this right here is going to be the tell. Who are we as Americans? Who are we as a country? If we won't even protect and save the life of a child who has survived an abortion attempt, who are we? And so that's why this discharge petition that we're working on, the discharge petition that Warren is working on to protect American energy, these are so, so critical. And this is what we're fighting every day for.
And I want to pass this off to Lisa, but before I do, with this discharge petition, with all of this that we have going on, it just proves that when Democrats come to Washington, D.C., they do not work for the people who elected them. They work for Nancy Pelosi. So even in my district, where I have 9 Democrats who are filed to run for my seat, they can make all the promises they want for rural Colorado, but at the end of the day, if they were to get to Washington, D.C., they do not work for rural Colorado. They work for Nancy Pelosi. And she claims to be a lioness when it comes to children. Well, Lisa can tell you firsthand what we saw on the southern border when it comes to the children and what they are truly going through right now.
Please go ahead, Congresswoman.
So we had an opportunity to go down to McAllen the past couple days, and what we saw was horrific. This is, in my opinion, modern day slavery. The cartels are the only ones that are winning, and they're smuggling these illegal immigrants over our borders. And what we saw at, was it midnight, 12:30? Yeah. We stopped on the side of the road, and there was probably 12 people there with us. And there was a young girl, maybe 7, 8 years old. We actually thought she was dead. Fortunately, I should say, she was so exhausted that she was just sleeping. We couldn't wake her up. We literally had to shake her to wake her up. But this is an 8-year-old child that is by herself in a foreign country. Think of how sad that is. As a parent, as a mother, that's horrific. And what happened to her parents? Did they pass away along the ride? I have no idea. And then we also saw a young little boy, a toddler, maybe 2, 3 years old, half clothed by himself. It was the saddest experience I've ever seen. And if you think that this is humane, maybe you should come down from your ivory tower and actually go to where the action is, because we can't fix a problem until we admit that there is a problem. And the issue is, because Trump's policies worked, we want to disband all of them. I often say this is, Trump could have the cure for cancer, and we wouldn't want to hear it because of who it came from. And that's the frustrating part to me. If we truly care about America and we truly care about the people of this country and our districts, we need to start actually working on policy and stop the bullying and the partisanship and put it aside.
Here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, we're talking with 3 Congresswomen who just entered Congress several months ago in January. Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado, Congresswoman Kat Cammack of Florida, and Representative Lisa McClain of Michigan. And on that subject of the board, I want to go back to you, Representative McClain, because it was just such a heart-wrenching story that you were telling of what you saw on the border. Kamala Harris, the vice president, just visited the border. What do you make of her visit down at the El Paso area in Texas?
What I make of it, it was nothing but a publicity stunt. And quite frankly, the border is on the border. I don't think El Paso is that close to the border, and it's definitely not at the epicenter of where all the issues are happening. So let's stop faking it, and let's actually do some good work. I thought that's what we're here to do, is actually do some good work for the American people. So to me, just save it. Stay back in Washington. Don't fake it. Either go and do a legitimate, honest attempt, or don't bother to go at all.
Congresswoman
Cammack.
Cammack.
Sorry, Jimmy. When we saw Kamala go to El Paso, it very much was a publicity stunt, or maybe her jet just needed to be refueled, and then there happened to be some cameras there. But she didn't address the true issue. I've been down to the Rio Grande Valley sector now twice, and this is where the surge is taking place. This is where the humanitarian crisis is taking place. The children that Lisa spoke of that we saw just a couple of nights ago, these aren't the criminal aliens that are crossing the border. These are the decoy that are sent by the cartel. And the true problem is a mile left of the station where the Border Patrol agents are and a mile right of where their station is. That's where the drugs are crossing. That's where the fentanyl is coming across. This is where there are rape trees and human smugglers. This is where the real problem is. But Border Patrol agents are so focused on taking care of the unaccompanied minors that are being sent over by the cartel that they can't do anything to stop the actual criminals that are coming into our country. And I think Kamala's stop to El Paso just proved that President Trump is still leading on the issues. He announced that he was going to go down to the border, and so she said, oh, quick, let me pretend to go there as well. But he actually went to the border. He went to where the crisis is taking place. He met with sheriffs. He met with local police. He met with the Border Patrol agents who are begging for help. They're begging for infrastructure, for technology, for resources, and for support.
Yeah, and I think you won't find more passionate advocates than Lisa, Lauren, myself. I mean, really, conservatives in the House have been leading while the administration has been watching. Like Lauren, I have been to the border twice, and I'll actually be there in a few weeks. I'm taking my sheriffs and several sheriffs from Florida because today, every town in America is a border town. There's no doubt about it. Being the wife of a first responder, I can tell you, my husband comes home and says, I just went to the same guy another time who has been overdosing on fentanyl and heroin. And this is as a direct result of the open borders that we have on the Southwest corridor. And when you talk about every town being a border town, there's fatigue. There's no doubt about it. The national news has covered this, mostly on Fox and conservative outlets, but people are sick and tired of hearing about it. So we have to continue to drive the narrative and tell the stories. I myself have met with a 9-year-old girl that was picked up in the middle of the night. She couldn't even tell me her name. When I said, ¿Cómo te llamas? She said, she couldn't get it out. And the Border Patrol agent standing next to me had to tell me that they picked her up on a field. She'd been screaming so loud and so horrifically that her vocal cords gave out because she was being gang raped. This is a 9-year-old little girl. I have seen with my own eyes the horrific crimes against these children. And yet the White House refuses to take action. So for me personally, I said this months ago, I cannot in good conscience call the man in the White House the commander-in-chief. He is the trafficker-in-chief because, quite frankly, he is completing the trafficking ring in this cycle for the cartels who are making anywhere from $20 to $25 million a day in just the smuggling of humans. It has no impact on the drugs, which are coming over freely. They make so much money that it is a great day in America if you are a member of the cartel.
I want to get to the economy in just a moment, but Representative Cammack, something that's coming to my mind. I mean, you and I have one distinction of a decade or more ago, each of us, separated by at least like 6 months or so. We interned for former Congressman Mike Kaufman of Colorado's 6th Congressional District, and his predecessor, who left Congress in after the 2008 election cycle, was former Congressman Tom Tancredo, and illegal immigration was his issue throughout the 2000s. And now we are, 13 years removed from when he left office, and this situation, this crisis at the border, has gotten much worse, Congresswoman.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember being a high school graduate 1 month away from graduation in 2006. And I remember I had a classmate, Amber, who was kidnapped and sexually assaulted by an illegal who had been deported 6 times. But because of the sanctuary cities that welcome and house and protect these illegals who have been continually deported for violent crimes, he was allowed to come back and have safe harbor in Colorado. And had the law just simply been upheld, he would have never had that opportunity to kidnap, assault, and then lead a high-speed chase down I-25, which resulted in this horrific crash. It ruined this classmate of mine's life for years. She will live with that moment in time for the rest of her life. Her family has been living with that horrific experience. And I asked Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security, how many more Ambers have to be kidnapped before you will take action to secure the border? Because every single town in America is a border town. We are seeing the flood of these migrants being flown at our taxpayer expense, being housed at our expense in cities all across America. And I'm telling you right now, not every single one is here for a good reason or good cause. And you look at the number of gotaways, we're over the 200,000 mark. These are people who are actively avoiding border patrol. This is insane. We have no idea who's in our country and really how detrimental or dangerous they truly are.
Well, I real quickly, Congresswomen Boebert and McClain, I'm struck by Mayorkas just completely unwilling to acknowledge that we actually have a crisis at the border. And listening to what all three of you were saying, it is even more clear than it already had been to me that there is indeed a crisis at the border.
Well, what you have to do as well is follow the money. So I was in a hearing this week with this, or last week, maybe it was, with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I was questioning him, and I asked him, do you have a crisis at the border? And he said no. And then I asked him, do we have a crisis, a pandemic crisis? Do we have a healthcare crisis, a pandemic? Oh, absolutely, COVID, it's a pandemic. I said, great. Then can you explain to me why you diverted $2 billion from the COVID funds and the stockpile funds to deal with the non-crisis at the border? We didn't have a real good answer. So again, what I say about President Trump is, like him or not, he was the president who actually told you what he was going to do and then actually did it. Here you have this shell game going. You don't have any truth. You don't have any transparency. And it's really simple. Follow the money.
And Jimmy, I hate to do this, but we have 2 minutes to go cast our ballots and go vote. So we have to run out of this room because we want to cast our vote to make sure that we knock down any of Nancy Pelosi's agenda. So we got to go run.
Absolutely. Well, thank you
so
all
much.
three of you for joining us. We really appreciate the time. What a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy.
I appreciate it. Well played, Mr. Matoush. Yes, indeed. We are so grateful for them squeezing in a little time here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Again, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado in the 3rd Congressional District. Kat Cammack representing Florida's 3rd Congressional District. Again, Representative Cammack, a native of Colorado, representing Florida's CD3. And then Representative Boebert, a native of Florida, representing Colorado's CD3. I'm easily amused. Maybe that's what's going on here, but that is entertaining to me. And then Congresswoman Lisa McClain of the 10th CD of Michigan, all joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads for an exclusive group sit down. And what I thought was so striking is how they, how they all were talking early on about the camaraderie and the friendships that they have developed and how that developed. That was just so important to hear because, especially in the midst of the pandemic, as we were talking about and how things started in January of this year and even before then when they began with orientation, the environment was so different from normal. So what was that like? And what has it been like? How have you been able to form these relationships and work together? And what they talked about in the discharge petition, Representative Boebert, Representative Cammack, both pushing forward with the discharge petition. If they can get 218 signatures on a petition, then they can force a vote. And that is fight. That is a fighting spirit that we need in Congress when we have this agenda on so many different areas, not the least of which, as we were talking about, is the U.S. southern border. Make no mistake, there is a crisis at the border. Those stories they were sharing they were absolutely tragic, heartbreaking, and stunning. Stunning that you have, yes, a publicity stunt just so the vice president could say, hey, yeah, I went to the border after dodging the question for so long. She finally does a visit and is able to at least say, hey, I did it. That's not good enough by any stretch of the imagination. And she would know the extent, just like these 3 congresswomen who were sharing experiences from the southern border and talking with children in the single digits who had been used and abused by coyotes and others in the most brutal ways imaginable. If that's not a crisis at the southern border, I don't know what is. We need action. But on that discharge petition component, this is something that we need to see more of from the Republicans in pushing forward with an agenda, being very clear on policy. If I recall correctly, Representative Cammack was saying for her discharge petition to protect children who have been born from botched abortions, this is critical, but she's 5 votes away or 5 signatures away from forcing a vote on the House floor after Pelosi rejected it 75 times. I don't know. So she's supposedly Catholic. I don't know how this is, how that can be. But the reality here is very clear. Republicans in Congress must push back using any tools and levers at their disposal. And that seems to be what at least some members of Congress are doing. If you want to talk about a squad, the left likes to talk about their squad with AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and the rest. That's a squad right there that's fighting for the founding principles of this country, and that's pushing forward with an agenda and pushing back. One thing we didn't get to today, due to time, was Representative Boebert. She absolutely just has a knack for getting the left-wing Twitter into a tizzy. Constantly, she's trending on Twitter. She just somehow gets under their skin. And I find that rather entertaining. But I digress. Bottom line, great conversation. There's a lot more we could get to. Who knows? Maybe we'll have another opportunity to sit down with Congresswomen Boebert, Cammack, and McClain down the line. We will have more congressional interviews, lots of things coming up here on Jimmy at the Crossroads in future programs, because we're trying to make sense out of nonsense, and you have to do it by talking to the people who are actually trying to make legislation, get it through Congress, and to make things happen for the betterment of this country. Well, that is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Once again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. My utmost thanks to our earlier guests, Roshini Rajkumar and Eli Bremer. They were just so great as always. I always thoroughly enjoy any conversations with either of them. Great insights today. And, of course, my thanks again to Congresswomen Lauren Boebert of Colorado, Kat Cammack of Florida, and Lisa McClain of Michigan. My thanks as well to producer extraordinaire Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic, to our partners at the Washington Examiner, and of course to you for watching, subscribing, and sharing our content. Have a great rest of the day, and as always, God bless America.
Great for generations, oh, what mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sin.